Mental health is a vital part of overall wellness, but making it a priority is not always easy, let alone talking about it. Here to tell us more is Project Steady Asia trauma therapist, Gang Badoy Capati. Gang, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the discussion, tell us, what is the difference between a clinical trauma specialist and a psychologist?
Oh, that's a large difference. Well, a psychologist is someone, it's a background thing. Of course, it's someone who studied, someone who took the licensing, someone who took the specialized in further studies on psychology. A clinical trauma therapist, which is me, I actually went through a different route of studying. I had multidisciplinary, so we went through art therapy first, and then I studied music therapy, and then I took in a fellowship with the Trauma Research Foundation of Boston. So I'm more specialized, and yet I'm also the one with a combination of other multidisciplines. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense.
So
But
it's
explain to us, what is trauma? And what are the different types of trauma?
Thank you so much for asking that. Okay, many people think that trauma is like a difficult or a difficult, painful event. And that's true. That's the traumatic experience. Okay. Trauma is the mark it leaves behind. If you're familiar, if you watch a lot of crime stories, you go to
Yes.
CSI or Law and Order, whatever it is that you watch, they usually say, look for signs of trauma. So it's usually blunt force trauma, stabbing, gunshot wound. That's
Yeah.
what they say. So meaning there is harm, but trauma is the mark it left. So when I say trauma, usually it's personality formation. What habits do you have? What kind of
Yeah.
reaction to compulsions you usually have? And usually it's an effect. It's a mark left behind from when you were raised as a child,
Yeah.
experiences you had, heartbreak, maybe heartbreaks you
But
had,
but but
things
but
that hurt you.
but
And
Gang, when
usually
you talk
trauma is
about
defined, Rico. Usually trauma is defined by an event that made you feel helpless.
okay, but trauma,
An event.
sometimes people don't want to talk about it, right? So what
Of
are the
course,
signs to
yeah.
recognize if our friends or ourselves are experiencing trauma?
Yes, thank you. You know, trauma really most of the time occurs and exists in secret. It's really something we don't want to look at because it's too difficult. It's too difficult to face it. In fact, a lot of the things that happen to us that pained us greatly, they're not top of mind on a daily basis. You don't actually remember them. In fact, there might be some traumatic experiences that you actually forgot that they happened to you. And there's a reason for that. Our brains really protect us on a daily basis. Our brain is fantastic. It knows that you are not ready to remember things, and actually sometimes you forget.
Yes.
So
It's
when
deep-seated.
yeah, I know, and it gets really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but there's a lot of growth that happens when you have difficult conversations and you actually bring up something. I think
So
this is why therapists are encouraged, because you are recalling with somebody who is trained and you're in a safe
yeah.
space and you can actually recall something difficult
So
as
so
opposed
Gang,
to just recalling it with the bartender.
So
You
gang,
know,
so gang,
that's a completely
gang.
different.
I'd like to jump in. What are your interventions when you are faced with a person with a trauma case?
You know, first of all, the fact that they approach us and they declare that, something happened to me X number of years ago and I'm trying to recover from it. For me, as a trauma therapist, I'm halfway. I appreciate that they recognize something happened. You know, it's difficult, Rico, when we don't remember, when we're not even aware that something happened to us, and yet we have patterns of behavior that we don't understand, and then we're not sure why we react a certain way. If you've had
Yes.
experiences where you reacted a certain way and you're wildly, let's say, hindi commensurate from what happened and you're reacting wildly,
Okay.
a good question to ask is, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Why is my reaction so large and looming compared to what's happening? A lot of
So,
people, a lot of people will think it's shallow when they say, "Oh, when someone's late." Some people take it really to
yeah.
heart and really cut friendships because their friends are late. And there are some that are, it's okay, it's late, there's traffic. So there's really a constitution per person how we react,
So
and sometimes no one is to say what's commensurate to
correct.
what. So like Some people get
So-
really mad when you keep the light.
when you react to
forget
something,
turn the lights off, and
something
some
that,
okay lang,
something
right?
that can just really tick you off, no? And you don't know why you were ticked off
Yes.
by that particular
Yes,
event.
you need to-
So,
I think-
so how can we
I think
build
you need to ask
resiliency?
yourself, Rico,
How can we
like,
build
why?
resiliency,
Why
gang?
is my reaction so large? Why is my reaction so large?
So how can
It's
we
just the
build?
lights.
How can we build resiliency in the face of everyday trauma?
Whew, thank you for asking that. Every day, mental health goal. I wish we had more time,
Yeah,
but
we
let's
don't-
do it
this
speedily.
might be my last
Mental
question.
health. A therapist's goal is really to take you to the present moment. What does that mean? It sounds cliche, but I'll tell you why. When you are anxious and you're worried about something that hasn't happened. You're worried about the future. How high will the dollar go? Who will the next president
Yeah.
be? Will this president, steal from me again? There's lots of worries, but in the future, it's not happening. And if you're nostalgic for the past, usually you get sad or melancholic, etc. Do you see what I just said? You're either 10 minutes or 10 years from now, or you're 5 years ago. So one big advantage of arts therapy and music therapy is really it takes you to the present minute. When you're listening to a song, a lot of us have music in our first aid kits for emotions. When you have a bad mood, usually I highly suggest that you must have an emotional first aid kit. For me, it's a few phone numbers of friends, ice cream, and sometimes it's music. So what happens when I'm having ice cream or I'm talking to a friend or etc., my mind goes to September 26, 2022. I'm not in 1996. I'm not in 1986. I'm not in May 9, 2022. And I'm also not worried about a future that's not yet here. So occasionally, please
Yes.
give your brains a break from being in the past or worrying about the future. Give your brain a break and be present. Like really be here. And I think this is why listening
gang.
is such an underrated
Gang.
ally of mental health.
Oh,
Stay
absolutely.
with us.
A very interesting discussion. We should have you back on the final word for more to talk about trauma.
I know, there's just so
on
much
the
to talk
final
about.
word. Thank you so much
But, yeah, that's
for your
pretty much
insights. Thank you so much. Project Steady Asia trauma therapist Gang Badoy Capati.